Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today we'll be giving my thoughts on the Shadowbringers Relic questline, I guess would be the best way to describe it. I was planning on including the Relic content as well, but knowing myself and how much I like to talk, then this video would probably end up being way too long if I were to include that as well. So thoughts on the Relic content itself will probably follow sometime next week. I've currently only finished one relic and I want to spend some more time working on my second and also seeing how our new nerfed Bozja feels like compared to how it was when it first came out. So that will come later. Today is mainly going to be focused on the quest line or the steps that we have to do to get our relic and then some other stuff surrounding that. So the Shadowbringers Relic, quite different from our previous expansion in the grand scheme of things. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time that we had a one-time quest that you had to do for your first relic, and then you can skip them for any other relics that you want to do later. And the same thing goes for having alternative ways to obtain quest related items. This last one probably stems from Eureka and how there was a very vocal part of the community that really didn't want to do Eureka content and would much rather prefer a normal relic grind like we've had in our previous expansions. So this time around they've tried to cater to both players. We have our relic content, Bozja, Zadnor and Delubrum, but if you do not want to do said content, then there are alternative ways for you to still get the relic done. These alternatives would be older content. I have some conflicting opinions on this because of how it was implemented, especially for our first real step, because in my opinion the first relic step wasn't really a step at all, but more on that later. But our first actual step, if all you cared about was one relic, then the alternative way was just a way faster way to get that done than doing the content that was designed for the relic. I know that if you invest some time into Bozja and get all the different relic steps active, then farming for multiple relics is much faster inside of Bozja than outside of it, but if all you cared about was one relic, then it was an easy choice to do the alternative way instead. Luckily enough, they did learn from this and made the later steps a much better balance between relic content and alternative content. If I look at our latest step, for example, I finished about 60% of it inside of Zadnor while I was just working towards finishing the story, and then I did a little bit extra once I was done with that, and then afterwards I did the alternative way to grab the few items that I was still missing. I thought it was very well balanced. Outside of just being an alternative way to do these steps now, it is also a little bit of future-proofing the relic. Our current relic content is mostly focused on group content. I know it's possible to do skirmishes, critical engagements, and large-scale assaults in a very small group of people now, and with enough investment I wouldn't be surprised if you can actually solo that stuff as well, but for the average player, being in a group will be the way to go, because not everyone has the upgraded Bozja gear, all their resistance honors maxed out, and also access to all of the lost actions. Even I don't have that. So having this alternative way to obtain the relic items is a good thing for when the Bozja content dies down in the future expansions. There will most likely still be people doing the content, but not to the extent that people are doing it now. As for our one-time step, I think this was fine. The relic has always been a bit of a grind, so with this we still have our grindy relic, but if you wanted to do more than one, then you wouldn't have to grind as much for any consecutive relics you would want to get, and I don't see any downside to that. So let's take a closer look at the steps themselves that we had to do to get our relic done. So step 1 was a bit of a weird one. There was a really nice quest line that you had to complete about Bozja that sets up the story for that, and then at the end of the quest you were simply given your first relic. If you wanted to do more than one, all you had to do was collect 1,000 poetics, and that was it. At the time it was fairly disappointing to me because we had been waiting on our relic content for a little while at that point, and now our new relic content was simply just do roulettes to get poetics, and that's it. There wasn't anything new for us to spend our time on. I was a very big fan of the questline though, that we had to do to get there in the first place, really enjoyed the single player instance, but I was expecting the process of attaining our relic to involve something new and not just get poetics. Right now I don't really care about it anymore because it means that if I want to get started on a new relic, it's very easy and I don't really need to grind for anything, but at the time I would have liked some new content to do. Moving on to our first real step. This one required you to actually do stuff. We had to obtain 3 different sets of items. These could either be obtained from doing just about anything inside of Bozja or by doing fates in the Heavensward zones. I believe the most efficient way to get this done now would be to go into Bozja, get an 8-man party, split yourself up between the 3 zones and then just grind mobs because they would drop randomly from doing skirmishes, critical engagements or by just killing mobs, and the alternative way was a guaranteed way of getting the items though. And that is what was very frustrating to me and a lot of others when this step first came out, because it takes a little while for you to get through everything inside of Bozja. And the drop rate for these 3 items didn't seem that good when we're looking at skirmishes and critical engagements, which was the only way for you to level up in the first place. So you'd already have spent a lot of time leveling inside of Bozja with not much to show for it in terms of relic items obtained. Compared to the Heavensward phase that had a 100% drop rate, this just felt really bad. Luckily enough, they learned from this and made the Zadnor experience better, which is our second Bozja zone, but at the time it just didn't really feel that good. If the drop rate would have been 100% on the critical engagements and the skirmishes inside of Bozja as well, then I would have just been happy with that quest step. Our next step has us collect 6 new items. These can again be obtained inside of Bozja by killing enemies, or from level 60 dungeons, or from leveling roulette once per day. Drop rate inside of Bozja is random again, with the alternatives being 100% drop rate, so running a fast level 60 dungeon is the way most people I know went about it. We then had to go and obtain 15 loadsome memories. This step was kinda bad when it first came out, but since then has been nerfed into what I think is a very good balance. You can obtain 5 of these by doing Castrum inside of Bozja, 1 from doing a Crystal Tower raid, and 1 as a random drop from doing critical engagements inside of Bozja. Right now I think it's in a pretty good spot. Just run Castrum 3 times. With some of the changes that have happened into Bozja, Castrum is now also much more rewarding, so I'm a fan of this. But when the quest first came out, Crystal Tower was unfortunately enough the way to go. This concludes the steps that could be completed inside of Bozja. If all you cared about was one relic, then the alternative ways were mostly the way to go. But if you want to do multiple relics, then Bozja is a much better way to go about it, because you can work on all of the steps that I just talked about at the same time, which speeds things up a lot. So if all you were after is one relic, then Bozja might feel like it isn't all that rewarding, but if you wanted to do all the relics, for example, then Bozja would just be the place to be. I do hope that they can strike a better balance next time if they were to do something similar again, because Bozja just wasn't rewarding enough for players that only wanted one relic, and I would like it to be more rewarding for those players as well, not just for the ones that want to grind multiple relics. And that brings us to our first one-time step, the Haunting and Vexatious Memories. This step got nerfed very quickly after it was released, but I'm still not a very big fan of this one. We had to obtain 2 different items, and it was, I believe, 18 of each, and you had 2 choices in how to obtain them. Either you run old 24-man raids, Heavensward for one, Stormblood for the other, or you do fates inside the Stormblood zones. This time around the 24-mans had a 100% drop rate, with the fate drop rate being incredibly low. It's this drop rate that later got buffed to make it a decent way to get these items as well. I think the main reason why I disliked this step as much as I did is because both options were old content. Up to this point, and afterwards as well, there has always been the option to do new content, except for our poetics, I guess. But for this step you could only do the 2 old options of content, and you also needed a lot of items. When I first did it, the fate drop rate was incredibly low, so I had to grind 36 24-man raids, and I was very happy with the fact that we only had to do it once, because if that wasn't the case, I would have never done a second relic this expansion, because it was just too big of a grind, it was very monotonous, and it was just very boring as well, because we had already done these 24-man raids a lot in the previous expansions. Second half of this step has us collect 15 time-worn artifacts that can be obtained in the Delubrum Reginae or as a random drop from Palace of the Dead. I think this one is alright, but I feel like they should have increased the drops that you get from the Delubrum by now, and you'll see why I think that is the way in just a second. It also dropping from Palace is kinda nice, because I've been thinking of going for a solo completion of that at some point, and being able to get my relic stuff done while also going for my Necromancer title is just a win-win situation. At this point you could also allocate stats to your weapon, which I was very pleasantly surprised that you didn't really need anything for this. You only needed to grind the items if you wanted to change your stats afterwards, which is something that I wasn't expecting, so I was a very big fan of this. Looking back at previous expansions, it was always a fairly big grind to put stats on your weapon in the first place, so just getting that for free was very nice. And then we have our final step. The first half is again another one-time step that has you collect 6 different items, 30 of each. These can be obtained from doing skirmishes and critical engagements inside of the 3 different Zadnor zones. So skirmish, critical engagements, times 3 for the 3 zones gets you your 6 items. And this time around the drop rate was 100%, with critical engagements dropping 2 items as well. So this felt really good. By the time that I was done with the story inside of Zadnor, I had already finished about half of the quests that I was doing there, and then I decided to finish the skirmish items inside of Zadnor before doing the alternative way to get the critical engagement items. Alternative this time around was old 8-man raids. Heavensward for the first set, Stormblood for the second, and then Shadowbringers for the third, and I think this step was probably the best balanced right from the start. It was also really nice that just doing the story inside of Zadnor already finished most of these quests as well, so I have nothing bad to say about it. Once you're done with this, you get your final step, which has you collect 15 raw emotions that can be obtained in the Dalriada, which drops 3, Delubrum, which drops 2, level 70 dungeons, which drop 1, or then Heaven on High, which has a chance of dropping 1. Again, I think this is pretty alright. You can do Dalriada if you want to gain more metal, to get those resistance honors to make yourself stronger in the Save the Queen content. Delubrum if you're working on multiple relics, because the previous step I just talked about also requires you to do Delubrum Reginae. Heaven on High I can do if I want to go for a solo completion of that, because I don't have the title of that either. And then the level 70 dungeons are great if you just want to speedrun one relic, because Blue Mage with Ultra Vibration just makes for some very fast runs. It is here though that I look back on Delubrum Reginae and just find it a bit weird that the Time Worn step still only rewards you one item per Delubrum run, because it is an alternative way for our final step and it gives you 2 items for our final step. So it is better for the final step than it is for the step that it was intended for. So this feels a little bit weird to me, and I would have liked to see it the other way around. That it would give 2 time worn artifacts and only 1 raw emotion, or maybe 3 time worns, 2 emotions or something like that. Just make it more rewarding for the step it was intended for. Overall, I think the relic this time around was okay. You had a good amount of different activities to choose from to get your relic done, as opposed to just do Eureka, which was the same thing throughout the whole expansion. So I prefer our Shadowbringers Relic compared to that, because there was just more variety in the things that you were doing for your relic. But I do hope that going forward that they make the relic content itself more rewarding, or as rewarding as the alternative options, if they were to give us alternatives again into the next expansion, like they've done with our final step, because I think our final step had a really nice balance between how rewarding the relic content was and how rewarding the alternative steps were as well. And if that was to be the case, then I'm very much so looking forward to how this is all going to work out in Endwalker as well with our new relic. Anyways, that about does it for me. Let me know what you think about our current relic this time around. Did you go for one? Are you going to get more than one? Did you use our new relic content, or did you mostly make use of the alternative ways, or maybe a little bit of a balance of both, kind of like how I've been going about it? Let me know down below. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.